So with no further ado, would you join me in giving a hearty Toolbox welcome to Erik Alexander. Erik? Thanks, brother.
Well, thank you so much for that kind welcome. After this delicious lunch, I'm going to try to stay on my feet and share some stories with you, but I feel like sitting down and just kind of relaxing into a food coma right now at the moment. It is my privilege to be here with you today and to share some stories from my life that I hope will encourage you and inspire you in a number of ways. But when I look back at these experiences, especially this one, climbing Mount Everest, I look at that mountain as a reminder, an Ebenezer of something great that God has done in my life. It's just a pile of rocks. But the Israelites, when they crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, they put up a pile of rocks to remember that great thing that God has done that led them from wandering in the desert to this great place. And so this afternoon, I want to share with you what makes this so special. And I want to ask you a question. Are you paying attention to where God is leading you in your life? Are you paying attention to the things that He's doing in the world around you? Because He kind of got my attention a handful of years ago when I saw this blood moon. And growing up, well, I've been a Christian for a long time. Growing up, I never really paid much attention to the sky, to the stars, to those things. I was a little bit afraid to. I'd see the horoscope and I'd kind of make fun of it, and I don't want to go down that road because that's astrology. And I know that's not good, that's not right. But just a few years ago, I got kind of tuned into something called biblical astronomy. And I think that's what the wise men were into when they went and they sought out the birth of Christ. They were paying attention. They were looking up. They were looking at the signs around them. And I bring this up because there's something really cool happening this month in September, having to do with the Feast of Trumpets. And if you look at Revelation 2 in your Bible, you can check it out. It says, "Behold, there was a great sign in the heavens." And it talks about a woman being clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet. And it's amazing, this took place 6 years ago. It had never happened before in history. Then there was a great conjunction, almost like the sign of the Star of Bethlehem, all over again, just a couple of years ago. And now this year in September, the Feast of Trumpets, that Revelation 12 sign is happening again. And there is a comet that's going to be called Child that's going right through the womb of Virgo. If you read your Bible, you look at the book of Revelation, start with Genesis because it says the purpose of the stars, the sun and the moon is for signs. And in Luke 21, it says, "Behold, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars." I just say that because I want you to get tuned in to the fact that God is moving mountains, but He's also moving the heavens to get our attention. He wants us to pay attention to the things that He's got going on in this world around us. These things will serve to show who He is. Well, who He is was a God that allowed a guy with skinny legs like mine to get to the top of the world and to take the most unexpected person with me to the top, a person who was blind, a person who people said, "You can't do that. You're going to die if you try. In fact, you might die just thinking about it." But I've been a part of a number of trips where I've climbed with people like this, people with disabilities, including one trip to Peru where we trekked over these high mountain passes, 15,000 feet, over 35 miles. We took 9 blind high school students to Machu Picchu. It was scary, but the scarier part about that was that we had 9 sighted high school students as their guides. And so you never really quite know where things are going to lead, where they're going to go. You know, we forbid the earbuds and the headphones, but they would sneak those in and pull down the beanie, and they'd be walking along, and the trail would get super narrow, and it would drop off thousands of feet down to the right, and whoa, this is really cool. You know, they're supposed to be leading someone, and next thing you know, the trail turns, and they go up, they're still looking. They forget about the person behind them who can't see the trail turns, and thankfully we travel in threes. It's the person behind that says, "Whoa," grabs a backpack, you know, and sends them on their way. Tragedy averted. It was great to see these students form this bond of trust. as they would trek along, and the camaraderie that they had formed and the friendships that were almost immediate. When they got to Machu Picchu, these students had special permission to duck the ropes and to touch these stones which had been carved by Incas centuries before. And I thought, this is great. We're never going to get these kids out of here. But after 10 minutes, they were ready to leave. I thought, what gives? What's going on? Well, to them, one stone just felt like another. You can only do so much of that. To me, I could sit there all day and look at the whole thing in its entirety and its glory and its beauty. But to them, like, oh yeah, it's just another piece of granite. Yeah, that's a cool shape. And they were ready to go. To them, what was special were the bonds that had been formed over that week and a half of getting to this special place. So much so that a number of them came up to me afterwards and said, this has been life-changing. I want to go to Africa, and I want to stand on top of Mount Kilimanjaro. Would you take me? Okay, that's great. So 4 of these blind students got 4 of those sighted students, and we took off 1 year later to Mount Kilimanjaro. And I saw them stand on the roof of Africa. It had opened up new horizons to them and what was possible for their life. And this all started because, well, they were paying attention. They were paying attention to the things going on around them, that, hey, here's an opportunity. I can say yes or I can say no. This could be just wonderful. This could be painful. I'm not sure. But it was life-changing. And I saw one of those blind students say, I want to be the first to go to the moon, not to the moon, into outer space. I want to be the first blind person to go to space. He got an internship with NASA. One of these days, it could happen. But to them, now Mount Kilimanjaro is that same Ebenezer. It's something great that God has done in their lives. Well, climbing these peaks, I've also had the opportunity to go to Denali, the tallest mountain in North America, and to go there with 2 blind veterans. One of them, a good friend of mine named Scotty Smiley. He was blinded in Iraq from a suicide car bomber. The other one, Marty Bailey, a Delta Force master sergeant who was blinded by a grenade that went off near his head. And these guys, they could sit on their butt and say it's over, but they decided otherwise, to keep their minds open to opportunities as they would arise. And here was an opportunity to, again, form that team and that camaraderie and try something difficult and see that there's still possibilities in their lives. And they do that in many other ways, but this is just one more. And so we got together and we got high on the mountain, but due to a number of reasons and a terrible storm in that year, something that hadn't been seen in the last decade, we got turned back. We made it as high as 16,000 feet, but we had to turn back. But it was still great to see these guys try and to see, hey, here's an opportunity. I'll just take a step of faith. I'll be courageous on this day, and I want to try to climb this mountain. And then off to Russia to climb the highest peak on the European continent, Mount Elbrus. With this, I would climb with a friend of mine who's completely blind, and we would make the first blind ascent of this peak. When we got to the top, we clicked into our skis, and we'd make the first blind ski descent of that same peak. And people here, maybe some of you ski, some of you aren't quite as familiar with that, but it's a high-speed sport, and there's a lot of obstacles. And being blind isn't usually that beneficial to skiing. So we trained a lot to make this happen. And we spent a whole year working on that. Well, he was a good skier to begin with, but working on that team dynamic and communication. And I say there's really 2 things that are essential to blind skiing. The first one is trust. And the second one, forgiveness. Because you're going to ruin that trust at some point. It just is the nature of it. It's going to happen. And I've run my friend off the edges of trails into shrubs, into strangers, into friends, even into a cameraman when I tried to set up this cool shot, spraying snow onto the lens. It didn't work out quite that way. He nailed him. But it's true. The amazing thing about my friend is not just that he's able to get up after an incident like that, but he's able to forgive. And to look back and say, I know you didn't mean to do that, but can we avoid it next time? And well, let's work it out. Here's our goal, is to go to that mountain. Here's how we're going to get there. You're going to quit running me off the trail. You're going to quit running me into people. So we work it out. Well, it does go like this. We stand at the top. I'm by his side, and I say, it's wide open. There's no obstacles. The snow is good. It's smooth, and it's pretty gentle, so you can make big turns. First one to the left. And he goes, and then I follow right behind him, and I'll say, turn left. He appreciates it if I speak up, as I tend to be soft-spoken. And then it's turn right. And when the terrain gets narrow and steeper, it becomes more of a dance. It's turn left, turn right. And sometimes it's more like turn left, turn right. And we're just in this groove like we're dancing. If there's something important that he needs to know about, it's important that I maybe tell him precisely what to do, instead of explaining that, oh, hey, there's a bunch of rocks coming up, and I think on the other side there's a cliff, so maybe it's time to really slow down, and you might want to think about stopping. No, it's stop, cliff. So word order matters when you're skiing. So I want to give you a try at this. There's a skier here. He's blind, and I want you to be the guide. So you're behind him. You're in charge. Okay, things happen quickly, so just think in your mind. You're calling the shots here, okay? Okay, turn right, turn left, slow it down. There's a tree. Whoa, 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 stop, stop. Okay, hey, can you hear me? Stop. Okay, that skier wasn't actually blind, but you... I think you get how the feeling would be being the guide. That's kind of what it feels like. Everything is amplified. But if we're paying attention to the things around us, if we're looking for opportunities, if we're looking for God's hand in our lives, if we're looking for him to reveal himself and what is going on, we have to start somewhere. And so I have a little bit of a list as I look back at my Ebenezer of those things that were vital, critical, important. And I start with prayer, but I think I actually should start with faith, because it takes just a hint of faith to even go to prayer. And so facing a mountain like Mount Everest, I started with faith and I started with prayer. Like, is this the right opportunity? But with that, you can't just sit and then continue to wait. It takes action. You got to move a little bit. And that takes courage. I think of you, Tom, and starting Toolbox Lunches, and it starts with that little bit of courage. Like, all right, we'll start with something. You gotta get the ball rolling. You gotta move. So when you begin to pray, you got to be ready to act courageously and take a step of faith to move. You got to be seeking truth, because that's who he is. You got to be prepared to respond and then continue on in perseverance. This is a picture of me climbing in the Alps, one of the great north faces of the Alps. It's a mountain called the Piz Badil, and it's on the Swiss-Italian border. And there's a classic route. It goes up a couple thousand feet. It's just beautiful granite. And I'm there with my good friend Erik, who's blind, and we show up in Switzerland. We're ready to do this climb, and we're having lunch kind of like this, and we're sitting at this hut below the face, and all of a sudden this rock falls off of a mountain next to us, and it's huge, so big that dust, this is about a mile away, comes and it kind of starts to settle in on us and on our plates. Like, that's a little unusual. I wonder if we should be wondering or thinking about this at all. It's a kind of a clue, kind of a sign. But the guides are still going. You know, they know the mountain. They know what's going on. And then another one, and there's dust going down the valley, and then more of this kind of granite dust falls on our plates. Like, guys, I can't really eat this anymore. There's so much dust. But that's that mountain. We're actually climbing this mountain. I think we're okay. There's some warning signs that there could be some rock fall, but we'll keep going. And so we climb up this mountain, and you can see it's challenging. We're going up these thousands of feet, and it takes all day. We get to the top. We camp out on top, and the next day we descend into Italy. as we're climbing, my friend he scans the rocks with his hands, and that's how he can climb these routes. I call it brailing. He reads the rock like Braille, and he makes a mental note that, yeah, there's a little hole there. I'll remember it so that when my foot gets there, it'll find that spot. I climb directly above him to tell him, no, that's not a good spot. There's a better one over here. And we work it together that way to get to the top. So we're at the top of this mountain. We spend the night in an emergency shelter, a little sardine can with a couple of Bulgarian dudes. And boy, it smelled rather ripe. But no worries, we're used to that. The next morning we get up and we kind of make our way down to Italy. And when we get to the hut on the Italian side, there's a lot of chatter going on in all kinds of different languages, people from all these different places and trying to figure it out. And what we find out is the mountain behind us has just collapsed. 40 million metric tons of granite has just come down into the valley, hit the glacier, and wiped out the entire valley. 11 people were counted as missing. The village where we parked our car got annihilated. The road was taken out. And holy smokes, this is a big deal. It made the Today Show. Talk about not paying attention to what's going on around you. When we made it back to town, there were helicopters everywhere, search crews going on. It was a mess. It was a couple of days before we could get out, and it was the chief of the fire department that took me in there, and he gave me a talking to and said, what on earth were you doing climbing on that mountain? Didn't you know that this was happening? And this is like, no one said anything to me. The guides were still going, I don't know, kind of clueless. I wasn't paying attention, not close enough to the signs of the things going on around me. And I think it's so important. That serves as a reminder of me to lift my head up once in a while, pay attention. Things could get serious. Well, 8 people died. 11 were missing. I didn't realize that we were the other 3 that were counted as missing until we showed our faces there. In climbing with someone that's blind, it's important to pay attention to know what you're getting into. And climbing rocks is one thing, climbing ice is another. This is up in Quebec, Canada, climbing with my friend Erik. And there again, I'm above him. We're climbing in 3s. It's usually best that we go in 3s. And I'm trying hard to watch the ropes and making sure I don't swing my ice axe or my crampons into the rope, because that could be bad. I look down between my feet, and this particular ice climb is 1,200 feet tall. And there's my friend swinging his ice axes blindly behind me. And so if you're blind, you can't see where that rope is going, so you got to figure out something else. And it's a solid tug of the rope, and that rope goes, hits you in the shoulder, it's on the right, or maybe it's on the left, or maybe it's right in your face. But whatever it is, it communicates. The rope's here, don't swing here. Swing a little to the left, a little to the right, avoid the center, and we communicate like that. Don't kick it with your crampon. It's your lifeline. But like that, we move up. We communicate. It's paying attention every single swing as to where that lifeline is. We've had fun traveling the world and doing these things, and I'd say, really the greater the obstacle, the greater the lesson, the greater perhaps the reward, but the greater the opportunity to grow as a team, to learn and to seek the Lord too and what His plan is. In going to Mount Everest, we would do a training climb on a mountain called Amet Blanc. It's a neighbor of Everest. It's not as high, but it's technically more demanding. It's got steep sections of rock, steep sections of ice, and we thought this will be a great chance for us to get to know each other as a team. So when we do Everest next year, we're going to have it all dialed in and figured out. And so I'd be climbing with Erik, and I'd be exposed to the elements, and we'd go up this section of rock here called the Yellow Tower. It's technical rock climb, and I'd be yelling to him, reach up to the left, and he'd get to a point and it'd feel like it's a chalkboard, and I'd say, there's another hold there, it's just 8 inches up and 6 inches over, and he'd go and grab that, and like that we move our way up. And it's windy, it's cold, the snow kind of comes through from time to time, and it's exhausting. So when we get to camp, we're thankful that the team has actually climbed ahead of us and set it up. There it is, this little island in the sky, our tents. And I'm thankful that, my teammate is blind because that's my tent. No problem, he can sleep on the left. Well, he's a little quicker than I am, so he put his dirty socks and underwear in there and all over, and well, I got stuck with that left-hand side as he took the good side of the tent. And well, as we climbed in, our team went back down to base camp to get more supplies, and as they did, a storm moved in, and it pinned us in this tent together for 6 days. There we are at 20,000 feet. There's not a lot you can really do except get to know each other better than you ever wanted to. And you know, I became the camp cook, and so I'm melting the snow and ice to make water and cook our meals, and then you wake up in the morning and make a little coffee and things get moving, if you know what I mean. You guys are in school, you know what that means. There's kind of that burning question that never, you know, you got to know. Like, okay, how do you go to the bathroom up there? Well, I know you just had lunch. It'd be rude to talk about it, so I won't. I'll just show you a picture. This is a picture of my friend doing a bombing raid over Nepal. If you know what I mean. If you don't, Tom will explain that to you later. You got to get a little creative. Well, the team finally came back up after 6 days and rejoined us, and we gave it our best effort to climb that peak. We got 1,000 feet higher, and it wasn't going to happen. It was too dangerous. The snow that had been there throughout that stormy period had left it in this dusty coating, and it was just unsafe. And the world told us that we would fail with a blind person climbing in the Himalayas. And so inside, our pride is kind of getting the best of us. Like, no, keep going on, keep pushing, keep doing it. You got to go, get to the summit, because that's success, right? I know there's a lot of successful guys in this room, and isn't that success? It's standing on top, it's planting your flag, it's raising your arms, it's that. Well, I learned a valuable lesson that can get you in trouble. Our success was communicating, making a wise decision, turning back in spite of our critics. One person summited that mountain that spring from another team. It was a Russian guy. He lost all 10 of his fingers. Is that success? Well, maybe in his mind it is still that he's the only guy that stood on the top. But I think I'd rather have my fingers. I determined success to be coming back with your fingers and your friendships intact. And so that was hard. But we decided we'd turn back, and I thought, you know, this is a team I would climb Everest with, a team that's willing to swallow their pride and come on down. But it was on the way down that I had to unclip from a rope. Imagine this stage is where your tent is, and on this side it's 600 feet down. And then there's rocks that are kind of jumbled up, and there's just enough room to set up a tent uncomfortably. And so being exhausted coming down from that, I unclipped from the rope, and I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, I get close to that ledge, and this rock just shifts under my feet. It sends me down onto my stomach. I grab the rock, and then it starts to go over the edge with me. And I realize if I don't let go, it's going to crush me at the bottom. So I let go, hoping to grab the ledge, but my gloved hands just poof. I begin to fall. I'm always asked, well, what were you thinking? As if you can pause in that moment and really think of anything. I was thinking, do these pants make me look fat? No, it was 4-letter words. Yeah, you know the ones. Help. Stop. Grab. Pray. And then it was a free fall. I hit some rocks, bounced a little bit, slid a little bit, free fall, hit some more rocks. 150 feet down, I landed on a ledge about the size of one of these busing tables. I landed on my feet. I had my eyes closed at first, afraid to open them, thinking I might see angels. And I kind of did this. I felt, is my femur going to be sticking out? My bones broken? But it was like I landed right in the hand of God. And that he said, you know, I still have a plan for you. I'm going to spare you the extra 500 feet. Thank you. And I looked up and I saw my teammates. There was 3 of them, and they're kind of waving like this. Like, all right. They threw a rope down to me, and I was able to go back up with the help of one of our Sherpas. And I got up to that ledge, and I saw my teammates, and the first one was this tough dude from Alaska, and he's got a goatee, kind of like yours, but he had more food in his. And he said, dude, I thought you were a goner. And I walked away like, okay, how about a hug? And then my next teammate, he was an ER doc. He would be my tent mate. And he said, he was kind of a throwback to the 60s. He said, all I could say was, whoa, man, stop. And my third teammate said, I just started praying for you. I was super thankful for that. It's just an amazing thing that somehow I managed to land on my feet on that ledge, didn't break a bone, and I saw nothing but God's hand in that. However, that night, my body went into shock. I was getting high-altitude pulmonary edema. The only thing you can do for that is to get to a lower elevation and put on some oxygen and hopefully get through it. There's some medications you can take which will help too. So with the help of my ER doc tent mate, I made it back down to base camp. My oxygen saturation was 45%. Kind of the next best thing to dead, but I was just glad to be there. I was put in this thing here called a Gamoff bag. It's a pressurized tube that simulates lower elevation. And so at 15,000 feet, it was as though I was at 9. And I'm smiling in here, you can see, because I don't realize my teammate is reading the instruction manual behind me on just how it might save my life. But really at this time, I was spending time praying. And the amazing thing was, I felt this peace. And I knew that people at home were praying for me too. In Thessalonians, we're told to pray without ceasing. And that's what I was doing, as well as hacking up things of wonderful colors. But I had this peace that I'm going to make it through. Well, a helicopter was what I needed, but there were no helicopters willing to come, no pilots willing to fly because the storm was still in the area. I didn't know how I was going to get out of there. And then a little hole opened up in the sky over base camp. And there was one pilot that said, I'll give it a try. And this guy risked his life for mine, a complete stranger. And he flew up there with a very light helicopter. I hopped in, we took off, and we made it to Kathmandu as the sky closed in again over base camp. And there again, I looked back and I saw the hand of God just saying, I've got this. Trust in me. Lean into me in this time. Well, that was just the beginning because I got home and I thought, this is over. I'm the biggest loser on the planet. How could I do this? How could I let my team down, especially my blind friend who relies on me so heavily? There's no way they're going to have me back to Everest. And I was in this time of fear and doubt and self-pity. And I thought Everest was a dream that I had, and now I gotta let go. And I had to go hang out with my friend Joseph. He was my best friend, my prayer partner, climbing partner, a guy that I really respected, a man of character. And he would encourage me. He'd say, you gotta go back. This is a dream of your lifetime. I'd go with you if I could. I'd carry your bags. But don't give up. You were meant for this. So I'd listen to him, and we'd pray. And then Joseph went missing one day. It was now 2 months before I was to go back to Everest, and I live in Vail, Colorado. Joseph went missing into the backcountry. He was a snowboarder. There was fresh powder on this winter day, and he went into this extreme backcountry. And he descended, and then he didn't show up at home. He didn't show up at work. I rallied my friends on the ski patrol, and we went out early the next morning, and we were looking for Joseph. And we found this solitary snowboard track through the powder that ended abruptly at the top of a cliff. Figured, well, he was trying to air it out. He maybe hurt his leg, and he's in a snow cave down there. But when I came over at the top of that cliff and I looked down between my skis, I saw my friend Joseph's snowboard looking back up at me. He'd gotten flipped upside down and landed head first, and he got pinned in that heavy snow, and he had no way of getting out. He suffocated, he froze, and he died. The grief was almost more than I could take. He's a friend like I hadn't really ever had before. And I went to his memorial service, and when I was there, I stood by his casket and I saw his high school yearbook, and it was opened up to this page where the question at the top was, what are you going to do after graduation? And Joseph's answer was so much different than everybody else on that page, because they said normal things, fine things. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to do this. I'm going here and there. Joseph said, I'm going to make a difference in the world around me. Whatever that looks like, whatever I'm doing, that's my goal. And that's how he lived, and that's who he was. I took that to heart, and I went back. I went back home, and I met with my team, and I was praying, and I thought, Lord, please close this door. I don't want to go back to that mountain. I can't face it. And as I prayed, those doors just swung open. I saw a pulmonologist, and he said, if you're careful, I don't see why you can't go back. Ah, nuts. That was my excuse for my team, right? You're going to show the doctor's slip. Okay, well, we don't have the money. Phone rings. A pharmaceutical company is called to sponsor the documentary, which will sponsor the climb, and the National Federation of the Blind is also going to kick in $200,000. Oh, okay, well, I guess money's no longer a problem. Let's see, well, the team, they're not going to want me back, and put it in front of them, and not one of them said no. So I last chance effort, Lord, this is it, rolling the dice, come on. I'm going to ask my blind friend. He, of course, won't want another gimp taking him to the top of the world. I'll never forget his response. He said, being blind, my whole life people have made judgments about me, what I can and what I can't do. I'm not about to do that same thing to you. You've got to decide for yourself. Oh, nuts. All right. So I said, all right, Erik, I don't know if I'm strong enough to get to the top, but I know I'm strong enough to help you get there. So if you have me back, I'll go with you as far as I can, and I want to see you make the summit. Well, so it was a year after my accident, we took off for the Himalayas. And so when you pray and you ask for those answers, sometimes they're not exactly what you want. But what the Lord does want from you is to trust in Him and to take that step. And in order to take that step, you have to have a little courage. One of my favorite verses is Joshua 1:9. It says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I took that to heart. He'll be with me. He's with me here now. He'll be with me. I'll take that step. I'll be strong. I'll be courageous. And I'll go just as far as He will let me go. So we made that trek back into the Himalayas. And again, the doubters and the critics were making their voices heard and known to us. And in fact, elite Himalayan veterans were saying, you don't belong. And people close to us were saying, you can't climb there. You don't belong. And you're going to die. And He's going to take you with Him. And our response is, well, that's great, Mom and Dad, but really, we have what it takes. And so we would keep going on and keep trekking, and we'd have a bunch of new Sherpas with us who are a huge and integral part of the team. And as we would go, we had 2 other blind trekkers with us. And these guys were new to it. And so they would lose their energy, their stamina. They'd need to sit down. They'd maybe trip on the trail or go off the trail. And the Sherpas would see this, and they would then look at Erik and say, those guys are blind. That guy, I don't think so. And so as we're trekking, they would come up to Erik, sneaky-like, and go, made you blink, but he, of course, wouldn't. But that was the trap. They were going to get him to blink, and he'd feel that wind go by his head. He's like, what's going on? And eventually, it began to divide our team because the Sherpas were doubting that he was actually blind. Walking down the trail, he'd go along, and maybe we're talking, and he'd go with his trekking pole. Yeah, I thought there was a tree there. That kind of thing, because he's echolocating, and he's just got some amazing skills. And so the Sherpas were thinking, yeah, if you're blind, you wouldn't know there's a tree there. And so we realized, if this is going to work, we got to get the Sherpas in here and tell them, Erik, you got to tell them your story of how you lost your eyesight and everything. Yeah, I'll take care of it. So we're in the dining tent around a table like this, high in the Himalayas, the candle burning, the breath rising. Sunburned faces, the Sherpas are kind of like, yeah, whatever. Erik comes in and really without saying a word, just goes, pulls out his prosthetic eyes. Yes, it does sound just like that. Looks around the tent and then puts them back in. The Sherpas, their response was the same as mine. It was, please don't do that again. We believe you. So that next day they go to his tent first. Here's your tea. Do you want some milk? I'll take your backpack. Let me take your hand. I'll help you. Like, we're back in it. We're on this. We're a team again. We're in this together. And so we can move forward. I think sometimes when we're doing this kind of thing, when we're serving, when you're doing a lunch like this, you're best if you're walking a mile in someone else's shoes to best understand their life and their circumstances and how you can best serve. I would walk down the trail then, maybe spend half a day being blind with one of my other teammates just to figure this out. How can I do it better? And I could be a better guide, I could be of better use to my friend if I'd walk a mile in his shoes. And it doesn't even give me a clue to what his life is like. I'd try eating a meal, what it's like to eat this meal when your teammates are putting hot sauce on everything. Like, it's not fair. Yes, we play pranks on them all the time. But walking a mile in another's shoes, it would give me a clue as to how I can be a better guide. Going up through the ice fall, the climb would really begin, and I would see that courage play out. Courage is defined as facing danger with confidence and control, but I think a better definition is this. It's the mental and moral strength which propels us in the presence of fear. So I'd like to ask you, where do you need courage? Where is the Lord leading you in these days? Can you take that step? Will you do it prayerfully? Will you surround yourself with a good team of people to perhaps do that and to walk accordingly? Well, you can see it played out here as we would take our first step onto this ladder, which would be about 30 feet long, a number of the weakest ladders you could find in some back alley Chinese market and tie them together with shoelaces, put them at 19,000 feet over a bottomless crevasse. Perfect chance to exercise courage. Here it is. Now imagine you're blind. Too far, too far. So Tom, who put the lunch together, did something special today. He's got ladders up on the roof, and I know it's a free lunch, but actually if you want to get out of here, you got to go over the ladders and keep your napkin. That's your blindfold. But you can see that courage that played out there, and after a while you get accustomed to it, but it's that first step. It really takes trust. And for us to succeed, we'd have to have that trust. We'd build it, and it's made of these components. It's reliance, proving yourself reliable. It's competence, showing that you have the knowledge and skills to be in that place. Commitment, committed to each other, committed to the goal, and then those things bring about confidence so that you can continue to move forward. That's the kind of trust that made this team different from so many others on the mountain. Because this would then play out to be true for our team, that two are better than one, because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can pick him up, but pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Well, that was me, my friend Erik, picking me up, saying, I still believe in you. I still want you on this climb. And it was me picking him up, too, every day as we would climb up towards this 29,000-foot summit. Up the Lhotse face to our third camp. We'd go through that ice fall 5 times on the way up, and then 5 times on the way down, too, acclimating and carrying loads each time. This whole climb took us 2.5 months. And now this is our final ascent towards the summit. Acclimated, feeling strong, ready to go home, though, and quit any moment because it's getting exhausting, and I'm tired of being in this place. Over the Yellow Band, over the Geneva Spur, and then on to Camp 4. And when you arrive at camp, the wind is howling through that saddle. And then you see things that you weren't really expecting. You knew they were there, but you didn't think it would be so close to your tent. What I'm talking about are the people who've died on the mountain. This is a Sherpa who had died years before, but his body is still frozen to the ground and preserved in this spot. And you realize here's a guy that died with all of his senses, strong. What on earth are we doing trying to bring a man up who's missing a critical sense of his own? And it's sobering and it's humbling and it's scary. The fear and the doubt, they creep in, and things seem to be falling apart as we hear of other people dying on the mountain just the night before we're to go to the summit. And then as we're sitting in there in the dark, we got our headlamps on and we're playing a game of cards. Yeah, they're Braille cards. Playing this game, a guy comes down uninvited from another expedition. He comes over and unzips the tent. His eyes are bloodshot. He's got boogers running down his nose. He's got hair growing out of his ears. And he's from Scotland, I think. And he pokes his head in. I think it's a Yeti. Like, ah. And he goes, "You guys, you're going to have a hell of a time getting a blind guy up there." And then he zips the tent closed and walks away. Oh my gosh. It's like a leprechaun just peed in your Lucky Charms. What? Tell me something I don't know. Okay, all right, focus. We're looking at each other and my teammates with this laser focus, and one of my teammates looks at me and he says, "Would you pray?" Because he knows that I've been praying this whole time. And I said, "I will, but you got a mouth, why don't you pray too?" At base camp, there was 2 guys on my team, myself and one other, that are Christians. At Camp 4, I think there was 10. When we got back down to base camp, there was again 2. It's just interesting how your faith increases as you get higher in elevation. But anyways, yes, I prayed and with all my heart. But then this peace came over me again, looking up at the mountain and knowing what lied ahead and how difficult it would be as we would climb up. I had this peace. And my peace came from this, and knowing this, from Romans 8:38, that I'm convinced that neither height, neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus our Lord. And I took that to heart, and it's in my heart, and I knew that death wasn't the worst thing that can happen to me. I didn't want it to happen to me at that moment, but I think that's what set me apart from my team. I wasn't just riddled with fear. I was ready to continue on, knowing that I had that as my peace. Well, we stepped out into the darkness, all of us with our headlamps illuminating the way, just a little circle of light, all of us except for one. And we'd work our way up, and then we'd work our way into this whiteout where I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And I heard the guy behind me say, "I haven't seen mine in 20 years. What's the big deal?" Okay. Well, it's kind of a big deal because you need me to see where we're going, Mr. Smarty Pants. And, we'd just kind of keep going on. And then eventually I'd see this light come back down, and he's hugging the team as he's going down. He gets to me, he lifts his goggles. He's got a tear running down his cheek. It's our team leader. He says, "I got nothing left. I got to go back." Well, thankfully, our team doc was there to meet him, and they went back down to base camp, but the rest of us were still feeling okay, and we continued on. But eventually, that whiteout gave way to the sunrise. And though I couldn't feel the heat, we felt that warmth of hope that it offered, that we might just make it to the top. And then with a few tugs of the rope on the Hillary step, a kick into the snow, and a kick onto the rock, and a tug, and perseverance, we made it to the top of the world. A team that was supposed to go down in flames set 5 world records. The one I'm most proud of is the largest team. The blindest man in the world, as the Sherpas called him, made it to the top, another record. First American father and son, and then the largest HD camera, a 25-pound camera that made it up there too. And it was just fantastic to be there. It was the biggest group of crybabies. You could probably add another one because we didn't have words, just tears and hugs that we had made it. When we descended, it was quite an ordeal getting out of Nepal, but we made it back home. We got to go to the Oval Office. My friend made the cover of Time magazine. And I'm not at all bitter or jealous or angry about the fact that this rope goes to me. But that's okay. And had a great opportunity to be with Sir Edmund Hillary, being with one of my good friends and two of my heroes in that same picture, my friend Erik, Sir Edmund, and myself. And then just a couple years ago, Erik had the great idea to go back to Nepal and to face Ama Dablam. And when he presented me with that idea, he said, hey, there's still a mountain out there that we haven't stood on top of. What do you think? Do you want to go back? I said, oh yeah, I'd love to go back. And so we went back to the Himalayas with a small team this time. And we went up the southwest ridge of Ama Dablam, right this way, to that 22,000-foot, 500-foot summit. This would be the area where I had fallen years before. But here we are, old men now, going back, camping through the night, many nights on that mountain, and then a great and wonderful summit, looking across again at Mount Everest. Again, that reminder of something great that God has done in my life. When I was full of fear and doubt, all he wanted from me was to take that first step. Have a little faith, have a little courage, a little trust. Surround yourself with a good team and trust in him. Wasn't promising a summit, just wanted my trust. How about you? What's holding you back today? God's moving all around us. He's moving the heavens. He's moving here on earth. He's moving in your life. Are you paying attention? Are you looking out for the signs? All he wants from you is to take that first step. Show a little faith. It's like this. This I call the Jesus ladder. We called it the Jesus ladder as we had nicknames for places on the mountain because it was the first word out of my teammate's mouth when he stepped on it. And he said, if you don't believe, you're going to start believing when you step on this thing because it shakes and rattles and rolls. But to me, it's a great example, really, of what Jesus has done. You see, this crevasse kind of represents sin, if you'd rather call it wrongdoing, wrong thoughts, whatever it is, those things that separate us from God. And every one of us has that in our lives. But Jesus came, born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, and laid down his life to get us over that chasm. If without that ladder, there's no way for me to run and jump and get over that bottomless pit. It's going to swallow me up. The only way across is to lay down that ladder and take a courageous first step across and have some trust. Well, that Jesus did that on the cross. He laid down his life. But it didn't end there. He rose again. And in that, there's a promise for us if we believe. And that promise is getting beyond our sin because he's taken that away. And it's a way to approach a perfect and holy God is through his son Jesus. If we just believe. And that's all he's asking from us, is a little bit of trust, a little bit of belief, a little bit of faith, and to trust in him. And with that, we can be with him for eternity. And that's what he wants for us. I look back at this mountain and I see what a good thing God has done in getting me to that summit, but it pales in comparison to the good thing that he's done in laying down his life for me and cleansing me of my sin with his blood. Not because he died, but because he died and rose again, and with that, there's hope. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. We ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters, 1 John 3:16. So if you would it be okay if I pray? Sure. I'd love to extend an opportunity for you to step out in faith right now, to put your trust in him. Maybe you have that, and maybe you just need a renewed trust, a renewed faith? Well, it starts with just a hint of faith, and it starts with prayer and speaking with him. So if you would, bow your heads with me, and I want to give you that opportunity to put your trust in him. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for the men in this room, for the life that you've given them, the hearts that you've given them, the challenges that you've given them, the mountains you've put in their lives that they face, the struggle that we all have. So many struggles in life, and so much of that is maybe sin, things that trap us, each and every one of us, ensnares us. It sure ensnares me, Lord. And so we humble ourselves here before you today, thankful for what you've done. Thankful, Lord, that you've died on that cross. If you would pray with me here, just say, Lord Jesus, I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe that you did die on that cross, and I believe that 3 days later you rose again. I pray that you would forgive me for my sin, and I'd like you to sit on that throne of my life and lead me in your way everlasting. I put my faith and trust in you today. In your holy name I pray. Amen. If you prayed that prayer today, you never have before, seek somebody out that can walk through that with you, what that means. Get into God's word, meet with a guy like Tom here. He'll lead you on that path and grow you in encouragement and hope and in faith. But for now, thank you so much for your time and attention while I got to share something great that God's done in my life. God bless you all.